I was growing up, I didn't have field guides at all. There were no field guides for like any butterflies in the West. The closest thing we had was Alexander B. Klotz published a Peterson field guide for the eastern United States. Anybody know Don't Cry for Me, Argentina? Right? I did that because it seemed funny to me at the time. Like I said, I've been cooped up. You know? Right, now the deal is that as a result of this personal experience, I developed an intuitive understanding of our butterflies, which, as I've been brought to learn over the last couple of years, is insufficient to help all the rest of you. So, for example, we were in Moses Meadows a couple of years back, and there was a string of people that had, containers with butterflies in them, and I was standing at the head of that string, and they were following me around, and they were bringing in, one at a time, I would tell them what the butterflies were. And then they would ask like really annoying questions like, why? So I would say something to the extent that, well, because Pelham said so, which was, in fact, true, but not adequate. Okay, so tonight we are beginning an adventure, and we're going to, go on and help develop a new way of identifying butterflies in the field, sufficient to enable people that are far less sophisticated than all of you to begin with, but certainly will enable all of you to identify butterflies. All right, so I wanted to put a plug in for my favorite butterfly book, my first butterfly book. It was written by Paul and Ann Ehrlich, and you guys know who Paul Ehrlich is. And then it's important to recognize that this is really dry text. I don't think there's any question about that. But I want you to recognize the bottom couplet on the page. Okay, what does it say? Anybody tell me what it says?
Not so.
Not so. I'm telling you what, no one should ever put a couplet ending with not so, because then you have to go back and see all the stuff that it's not so to find out what possibly could be, right? Nonetheless, that's the kind of thing I was dealing with, is this, really dry stuff, this whole thing. So I ended up having to learn butterflies by peering at, like this is a part of a plate from Holland's Butterfly Book in 1931, which was really great, and this is an historic plate. I mean, a lot of the specimens that are figured there are actually types, and so they have scientific meaning and are referred to like in my catalog over and over again. But there's two problems. One is most of them don't occur in my particular region, and they also are using 1930s terminology. So that didn't really help me out too much. And here's another example. These are wonderful things, and anyone who has a chance to look at 1931 edition of Holland's Butterfly Book certainly ought to. But you need to know that it wasn't until 1975 that we actually had a butterfly book that dealt with butterflies in our region. And by that time, I had already become intuitively acute. Not cute, but acute, which has no bearing. All right, so that was the limitation. And this is another example from How to Know the Butterfly. That was a picture of a butterfly. Now, fortunately for me, I lived in a place where that particular butterfly was common enough that when I actually got one, I could look at that image and say, yeah, baby, that's it, all right. But that's not really good. Then, as a part of the revolution that's taken place over the last 3 years, people like David Droppers and Caitlin LeBar, who's not here tonight, but she gave me permission to use her artwork. Caitlin put together a key to fertilaries. And fertilaries are tough, period. They're just kind of hard for especially beginning people. I think she's shown by her key they're not as tough as all that. But I think what she also showed was that, if you put it together, this isn't exactly a key, it's a kind of a table key or a combination of those things. It showed that there's a lot of promise. And so this is up a little closer so you can actually see the categories and how she goes about delineating them. I really see a lot of promise for that. Of course, she's just doing this for Okanagan County. To go on a larger scale would require a little more expertise, but that's something that, it's an accretionary event. Do you like that, accretionary? It's a snowball cat, gathers moss, is that how that works? Yeah.
Is this part of a book or part of a specific
Yeah, it's
page?
part of a page. I took it out of this. I sliced it up.
So that's the whole thing?
No, this is the whole thing.
That's the whole thing, so
Right.
it's published like that?
And I cut it out so you can see it, so people can see it better on
That's
screen.
page 185 of the whole book.
Right.
What's the book? She has a pamphlet.
Yeah, well, it's actually in preparation. I'm reviewing it right now. I've been reviewing like Bob's book, and I'm ahead of time, so
She
to
has a
speak.
pamphlet.
Right?
Well, she put out a guide that's available in PDF or something like
Right,
that.
right, yeah. This is like, I don't know how she's gonna get it printed out. It's gonna be about 120 pages, right? And it's gonna be pretty nice. I like it a lot. She got really good images too. Anyway, so what I wanted to do is talk about some of the things that y'all need to have as part of your toolkit before you go out into the woods. Now, everybody here knows what dorsal and ventral means. I assume that your silence.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it is. Right. This is like sort of a tour. I wanted to look at, the butterfly wing has only one part structure that you need to know, and that's the discal cell. What's up, over there? The discal cell is a major part of the structural, it's basically a major support for the wing in flight. And you can see all the cells and veins that extend from it. I would not ask most people initially to learn that, but it's important to know the discal area, and you will see that term used a lot because it reflects a place on the wing that if you're going to talk about how a butterfly is different from another one, you will refer in the discal area or the discal spot or blah-de-blah, discal this, right? And then there's, caudal and cephalic. I don't use that too much. There's usually another way to say it, and it's not really pertinent to the overall wing pattern, which is what most of the keys, most of the guides most field marks that you're going to see have to do with the actual patterns on the wing, not so much front and back. But these terms, okay, apical. Okay, can anybody name a butterfly that is significant in terms of an apical marking, and it lives in Seattle, so that really cuts things down, right? Yeah. Absolutely, you win the prize, which is absolutely nothing. But Lordman's Admiral is it has an apical orange streak, and that's really important because it gives you something that if you had the question, it's like, okay, apical. Ortman's Admiral, I know what apical means. And it is kind of important because the wing, basically, forewing is essentially triangular, as you can see. You have a costal margin, you have an apex, an outer margin, and an inner margin. And these are all going to be used at some level or another to describe things in the wing. I will kind of get to that in a minute. I just wanted to get through these basic characteristics so that when I do some looking, I can actually ask you if you can figure out what it is that we're talking about. All right, so let's go and look. Okay, so here's a butterfly that doesn't occur in Washington. Yeah.
What is the caudal?
Caudal is the, okay, good.
With the tail.
Oh, jeez.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, caudal is the back end. Cephalic is, cephalic, hydrocephaly, all that pertains to the head. Caudal is tail, right? And
So we're talking about the body?
the back end, no, at the very back. If you say caudal, you're saying
Think
you're
of it-
going that way. If you say cephalic, you're going that way. So it's not actually a region, it's the direction. Okay.
It's like with
So
I'm sorry, John.
yeah, go ahead.
It's like with a fish, the tail is often just called the caudal fin.
Yeah.
Caudal fin, right? Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, well, at least I figure out. Okay, this is not a butterfly that occurs in our area, but it's a butterfly that shows some features. Okay, like if you look at that hind wing, what is one thing that just stands out? It's like really obvious, right?
The orange?
Is that band. Okay, now so that band is situated about where on that wing? Median, right. So this is a median band. And the one that's just to the outside of it, the gray one, that is a post-median band. Now, butterflies are like English, you know, in some ways. That doesn't always make sense, because if there's a median band and there's a post-median band, then the band that is to the base there, that should be a pre-median band or
Anti-medium.
It is sub-median, you're right. Okay. So it's supposed to be sub-median or pre, okay, well, that's it. You got it right. Right. So what's that little band along the edge there? What's that? Marginal band, right? So you guys already have this down. We don't have a problem here. All right. Now we get to a group that we're not going to talk about tonight at all. Because they're checker spots. And, well, we'll talk about them at the very, very end of the presentation. And the reason it's going to be at the end is because it's very sensual. And it's prurient, actually. And it requires a certain element of prurience to understand checker spots, because you have to dissect their genitalia. All right? And the kinds of things that motivate you to dissect genitalia are, by nature, prurient. Right? And
By definition.
here you got this great, I mean, you got all the bands that you'd want to talk about. You got, what band is that? What's the band inside of that, yellow spots? So marginal? Oh,
I'm not sure.
you're good. Maybe you could be up here. All right, so what's this red one? Post-median. Come on. So what's the yellow one there? A median band. So if I sit there and I'm in a situation and I actually feel foolish enough to try to describe how to discriminate checker spots, which I will do in the next slide actually. I would say that the post-median band is pale cream, post-median band is ruby red, and median band is cream, and marginal spots are red. Okay, so like the idea that these things are spots or bands, that's all depending on how they look on the butterfly. This is obviously, actually a band with red spots in the middle, whereas this is actually more of a band. But you know what? We're not going to bandy words about. I expected a bigger laugh. All right, so you guys got to nail. This is a question that I get on field trips all the time. Is the Edith line. And part of the problem is, on field trips that I've been on, we hardly are ever in places where the Edith's checker spot is flying. We're always where there's a Nissi or a colon flying, and very rarely where Edith's checker spots are flying. Well, that's a couple of reasons. One is, most of the places where the Taylor's checker spot is flying are, they're in protected areas, and they wouldn't really want a bunch of people with nets out flying, walking around. Or they're at high elevations, and we've been to places like Lion Rock where they would occur, or they're out in the deserts, and there's only a few places where they fly. So this isn't the best image. It was the best I could find, though, of the Edith line. Now, you see this line here, which is the post-median band. Y'all are bad. All right, it's got, you see that little black line that's in the middle of it there? Can you see that? I mean, I didn't know for sure if the graphics would show that, and I'm a little oblique to it myself, so I'm not sure how, rich an image it is from out there. But that black line is entirely contained within the red band. And that doesn't always work, but it's like one of the few things that works most of the time with checker spots, okay? So that's what the Edith line really is. And that's pretty much the last I'm going to say about checker spots. Okay, colors. Now this is where you got to help me out here, all right? Because this is tough. This is really, really, really tough. Somebody tell me what color that is. Tell me what color that is.
It's tawny.
Looks
Oh, it's
kind
not tawny.
of unsilvered.
It's what?
Unsilvered.
Well, no, don't look at the spot. Look at the, okay, look. This here, in fritillaries, we almost always talk about the ventral hindwing disc. And the reason we call it a disc is because there is a discal cell that dominates. That's the distal cell right here. So this area right to the base of that post-median band of spots is called, this basal area is called the disc. And that is a ventral hindwing disc. And ventral hindwing disc colors are really important in fritillaries. And in this fritillary, this is a Great Basin fritillary, Spirea glass. And that disc color is like, it's god awful, man. It's sort of brown, maybe with like almost a little greenish overtones, and I don't know. What's worse is this is a species, this is the same species right here. And tell me what color that is. Well, obviously it's got some green in it, right? But would you call that green? No, it's not green. It's kind of a buff, greenish, buff tan, maybe beige. You guys aren't helping me. What kind of a color is that?
Cappuccino frog.
That's not. Yeah, I'm gonna write that down and say, okay, that goes in the cappuccino froth right there. Well, and this is one that we see all the time. This one and this one. These are Coronas fritillaries, and we see them all the time on field trips. It's one of the butterflies that David James is going to be tagging because they're an amazing butterfly. They emerge in the spring out in the desert, and they go up into the hills and the mountains all summer long. And then they return and lay their eggs in the desert. And this has a wonderful advantage of avoiding laying your eggs out in the desert and having to put up with incredible high temperatures all year long. And so like this is a really advanced strategy for this butterfly. And they're sometimes in the untold hundreds of thousands. There's places when they're just, well, in eastern Washington in the spring, you know what purple sage is? It's a mint, bushy mint plant. If it happens to be blooming when these things are emerging, you can see like 300 or 400 of these butterflies just plastered on the mint before they take off. So it's a butterfly that everyone gets familiar with, but it's not one that if I'm sitting there with one in my hand and I tell somebody and they want to know why it's that, I say, well, because it has this buff green tan beige disc color. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, and then what's that? I mean, it's important that we come to some consensus, because I don't want to be left with saying something silly like buff tan green or ochre greenish. These are hard questions, and we're going to see some more. The reason it's hard is because there's nature is so variable, first of all, and if you're going to impart information to someone else, it's useful that we're all using the same vocabulary. I mean, words are only as good as the definitions we give them, right? So if we're going to make a field guide or a key or any kind of guide to identification, what we use as words to describe the organisms we're trying to identify are especially pertinent. And if I say buff, tan, greenish, and even if that's accurate, it doesn't necessarily portray to anyone else what exactly I'm talking about. Now here's another one. I actually like this one because it has a quality that's a northwestern butterfly, first of all. Can anyone see the purple tone in that butterfly? There is actually a tone underneath, and I talked with a number of people about how do you describe something that's kind of like there, but it's not there. You can't point your finger at the color, but it's kind of like in the background. And one fellow I've known, he used the word inclusion, and Nunley said, inclusion sounds more like like a mineral term. You have a vein or something that's penetrating. This is actually more of a subtle underneath appearance, and actually is more profound in nature than it is in a mounted specimen, because in nature all the colors are more vivid. In nature, you see a thing that is alive, and so the vibrance of those colors and the subtlety of a purplish color in a mounted museum specimen is much more striking and profound in something that you're going to see in nature. And this is a butterfly. This is the it's Hydaspes. What's that?
Fantastic.
Well, the Hydaspes fritillary. Well, that's terrible, and they couldn't come up with something better. All right, so now we're going to talk about some fritillaries that are confused. They have some color issues and they have some pattern issues. This is the Calippi fritillary, and I'm going to try to go back and forth between these two images. This is the Coronis fritillary, and these are two fritillaries that we're liable to see in the same places over on the east slope at the same time. Now, people will confuse the two a lot, and there's really, it's sort of understandable. The green aspect of Coronas kind of goes along with the green aspect of Calippi, although Calippi is really a green butterfly, right? But there's something else there that's going on. What do you guys see? The Calippi, Coronas.
The spots are weird.
Huh?
The silver spots are much different pattern.
The silver spots are kind of long.
Right.
Right, and that's exactly right. And they're stretched, okay? And there's something else. There's a ground color difference, which is hard to see. The top one on the upper side in the corner, this is one of Katie's images, and that's really a pretty typical specimen. That's like what you're able to see. It's a paler, kind of a yellowish orange, whereas Coronis is kind of a tawny color. But also, you see how the spots from the underside show through, and that's very, very typical. That's also hard to describe. I've kind of worked around that, and I've ended up pairing what ended up being half a paragraph into about 3 sentences. Yeah.
Well, but it seems to me a lot of the time, I mean, I've been looking for that with fritillaries for quite a while. It seems to me that a lot of the time, later in the lives of almost all the fritillaries, the spots kind of start coming through on the...
Right, no, that's because of where.
Right.
Right. No, that's another problem. We're going to get to that too. Okay. One of the things that a good field guide does, actually, and that's why I have in our collections at the UW, I have a number of specimens that people ask me, why did you collect that? I said, because we need to know what things look like when they're all beat up. And if you don't, then you're not going to be able to identify the beat up specimens that you see, especially with fritillaries. See, there's no magic bullet with fritillaries. You don't get to dissect their genitalia. They all look the same. I will return to that topic.
Repeatedly.
Yeah, well, it's just, it's a fascinating thing. We'll see later how fascinating it really is. Anyway, so another color issue, and this is something that I think this is resolved here tonight. What color would you say these sulfurs are? Huh? Who said green? Somebody said green. That's exactly right. Did you say green?
Green.
I said cream.
Well, you just... He's supposed to know, man. He specializes in spectroscopic analysis. But that's what... This is a greenish sulfur, which is another name I don't like. I guess Labrador sulfur is another name. Coleus nasties is its scientific name, and anyone who's ever tried to actually, catch one has another name for them. The nasty sulfur. They fly this far off the ground, and they always fly uphill. I don't know where the butterflies go, if they all get to the top and they disappear or what, but you never see one flying downhill. I'm serious. Okay, so here, we're going to go through a series of images that are going to, kind of, beg the question. What color is that?
Yellow.
Well, come on now. You don't see the orange?
Orange.
That's what I'm saying. So where is the orange? It's kind of at the outer part and along the veins. Like you look at that specimen over there, the veins are kind of lined in orange. Well, we did the UV reflectance on that particular specimen, and in ultraviolet, that orange color that's along the veins is reflected, and the yellow is not. So you have this dark gray butterfly with this scintillant UV reflectance. So it's probably actually important if, in fact, mate selection is important. But we don't. We know that it's not in some cases, and we know that it is in others, but, trying to describe, sulfurs are a booger. You're not going to hear too much more about them either. I mean, they're just, I'm going to do it all right here and get them out of the way, but Okay, so here, now there's no question about these, right? That's definitely orange, right? And the one next to it, yeah, it's orange, but it's not as intense, right? So we run into a problem of describing, okay, this butterfly is dorsally orange. Oh yeah? Well, yeah, this butterfly is sort of dorsally orange, or the orange is restricted to the veins, or it's a lighter orange, or it's an orange superimposed on yellow. I mean, you can see the kinds of problems we run into. Now, if every butterfly, if we had a species in the state, or two species in the state, and one was like that and one was like that, and they didn't have any other coleus, we'd understand coleus perfectly. That's profoundly different. We don't have a problem, right? Unfortunately, all those other ones I showed you, some of them are one of these two species. So, maybe they do some hybridization, or in the case of the alfalfa sulfur, is that the common name, or what is it?
Orange.
Orange? That's uninspired. Orange sulfur?
Yeah, they used to call it alfalfa butterfly.
I think alfalfa butterfly is much more, whatever. Orange sulfur? That took a lot of brain work.
So don't they, as the butterfly gets older, it fades in color anyway.
Right, well that's another problem that you have to address too. But this particular butterfly is seasonally variable, so that early spring forms have much less orange. It's concentrated just in the discal region of the fore and hind wings. So that factor into what, if you see one of those, in fact, Caitlin, 4 years ago, had a bunch of pictures her dad took, because they hadn't been growing alfalfa in the valley. They'd never had alfalfa at the house. So when her dad took these pictures and sent them back to Caitlin, she said, "What are these?" And I said, "Well, they're coleus erythemi, the orange sulfur." She said, "Well, they're not very orange." And I said, "Well, and they're not very big, and they have, they don't look like." I said, "Yeah, that's a problem." So we have to identify, and we'll get to some of that too. We have to identify the seasonal morphs. This is a sample of the butterflies that Andy Warren took from a single place on a single day. So if I was going to try to write a field guide account, or even write, try to describe this variation in such a way that anyone catching any one of these different things independently from having, we have a big sample here, so we know that this butterfly goes from orange to yellow in one place. And so we understand something that a person encountering just one or another of these wouldn't have a clue. But you have to describe them so that, yeah.
Has anyone just made a color key for this?
Well, you mean use it?
I'd like to have colors, say whether, and give a color to that name you showed.
Well, there's two problems with that. Yeah, actually, yes. There is actually a handheld device that people use to analyze colors in the field. But the best device that we have available to us, for the most part, are the non-handheld devices above our nose. And we are able to evaluate these things in a qualitative way. And we have to rely on that qualitative way, and to such an extent that it becomes intuitive, okay? Intuition can't be discarded here. Scientifically, there's three problems I've run into with people that are doing this work. One is that the devices you use to measure those things, you can measure angstrom units, I think. You can measure color in a lot of different ways, right? But the people that are evaluating these oftentimes have monitors that portray the colors differently. Then all of a sudden, there's all these variables that get kind of thwart the effort to identify. So I think we kind of do a qualitative thing instead of a quantitative
What
thing.
I'm thinking of is just as important as getting the exact color, though, is just the name. So you have a color with a name associated with it. That way, you could make it, in essence.
Well, I can do that right now. See that one over there? That one right there? That's spanky orange.
Right, that's fine. You call it spanky orange, then you would have that color somewhere. When we have the butterfly, the exact color, like in a circle, this is spanky orange. This is Pelham blue. This is this. This is this.
Don't use my name in vain.
I'm sorry. This makes
You may call down,
It's to praise your name.
All right. Well, actually, hey, I got nothing better than that. That sounds all right. We'll just add that to the list of things that we might. Now we're going to look at some things here. that, everybody has no problem. I wish I'd stop doing that, whatever it was I just did. All right. All right. Now this is, two species represented by this image, and these two species are actually pretty easy to discern. You can tell what the main differentiating feature is. One of them has these big orange spots on the marginal spot. Oh, good. And the other one does not. And the one on the left is our western tiger swallowtail. The one on the right is the Canadian tiger swallowtail. And that works well. It's like almost 100%. And if it's not 100%, then they've been doing the Humpty Bump. Okay, this is the other one. This is the Zelican swallowtail versus the old world swallowtail. And up on the right side is the old world. On the left side is the old world. On the right side is the Zelican. The classic character is the spot at the torn. I should at the anal angle. We'll call that. But anal angle sounds almost scandalous. All right. At any rate, you can see that Zelican has a pupa that's basically disconnected, sitting within the orange spot. Very, very characteristic. The old world swallowtail oftentimes doesn't have a pupil at all. It has the extension along the outer margin. It goes into the inner. But sometimes it can be swollen and club-like, but it's never in the middle of the eye spot. And then on the ventral forewing, you have, in the old world swallowtail, a very, very obvious and visible dusting of yellow spots, which is never present in the Zelican swallowtail. So, like, this is a butterfly, and this, I've never been misled. There's another character that I couldn't get a good feature of. It's Zelican abdomens are essentially black with a yellow stripe, whereas the old world swallowtails have a big yellow patch on the whole side of the abdomen's yellow. But so, like, you're not going to make a mistake with these butterflies. That's why I said they're pretty easy. This is also one that people make mistakes with, but they really shouldn't. And these are Beckers on the left, and is it spring white? Okay. I'm surprised somebody didn't mess that up. But the main difference, besides the obvious one, is that one's green and the other is kind of a yellowish brown, markings on the ventral hindwing. Did you see that clear spot there? I don't want to go too far, I'm going to fall down or something. That just beyond the discal cell on the ventral hindwing of the Beckeri eye is a clear area where all the veins are essentially clear. There's no scaling along them, whereas in the spring white, there's scaling along all of them. All right. People will talk about this so-called arrowheads that point back, and I think that's also a reasonable characteristic. I just never cited it. It might be one of those things that someone looking at a key that we prepare or a field mark, a list of field marks that we prepare would say, well, why don't you mention that? And then I will ask them to actually put it in words. But these butterflies are really not going to be mistaken for each other. Okay. And this is another one that came up. Melanie brought this to my attention last year, and all the normal features by which these butterflies are pulled apart. This is the Clodius parnassian on the left, and the Smintheus, or what, Rocky Mountain? Smintheus parnassian on the right.
Or mountain.
Mountain, whatever. And there's one really clear character that actually stands out as well as any of them. Everyone cites the antennal character, which we'll look at in a second. But if you look at in the forewing discal cell, okay, y'all remember where the discal cell is, right? And you see those bars, okay? And if you look at the Clodius, the bars are pretty much the same intensity as all the rest of the dark markings on the forewing. And whereas in the Smintheus and the mountain parnassian, those markings are much darker, much more intense. And that's very consistent. And once you recognize that, once you see it, it's like, instantaneous recognition. Now in the females, there's another characteristic that is useful, but it's not always present, okay? Clodius, females or males, never have any red on the forewing at all. Whereas Rocky Mountain, or the mountain, or the Smintheus, Parnassians, very frequently do. And so like that's, if you ever see a Parnassian with red on the forewing, then you know that it's the mountain. Of course, and this is the standard feature by which they're differentiated. It's also absolute. Clodius has a solid black antenna, and the Smintheus has that has annular rings of white, which make it look checkered. Again, it's absolute. That works, except when you go to the Yukon, right? And we don't live in the Yukon. This is another way to tell females apart. Now, if you can see that waxy white-looking thing that's drooping down from the female abdomen there, well, you knew I was going to get to sex again, but that is a chastity belt that the male puts on the female at mating. It's one of the few things that useless bags of sperm actually get to do. And it's really something to see because it comes out as a frothy substance. It's really amazing. It doesn't look like it would have a form in the shape that's characteristic, but when they get done and it hardens, it is actually extremely characteristic, not only in just our state, but across the globe. There's nothing else in the world that looks like that. Now, one of the first trips to WABA that I went on with a WABA field trip was to Rocky Prairie in the Tenino area, and we encountered a virgin Clodius that was an abnormal emergence. It just, it was like in July. They normally would have been gone, and of course there were no males around, but you knew it was virgin because it didn't have one of those things. But anytime you see that, then you'll know that you're dealing with the Clodius, and it's not hard to see either. Now this is the concordant, the Smintheus. Now you can hardly see it, but what you can see of it is it's dark brown. Okay, it's like a very compact and dark brown thing, and it's very, very characteristic. When we go on a field trip, I'll make a point the next time that I'm there to point it out because it's kind of interesting. It's also interesting that these butterflies and a few other butterflies that are also protected. By the way, Parnassian butterflies are protected. They're toxic, so don't eat them. All right. Just a word of the wise. I'm telling you, they're going glycosides and some other nasty things you just don't want to be a part of. And you can tell that actually if you're out flying. If you're out walking around in the field and you see a Parnassian, how do Parnassians fly? Like, not a care in the world. They're just kind of cruising along. It's like, well, if you taste as bad as they do, you can afford to be that way. I mean, and you're white with black markings and orange spots. It's like, yeah, that's called aposemesis. It's like, I taste nasty, like, you don't want to eat me. Well, there's other butterflies that also have astragus and are toxic, and it's really interesting that they have, very similar flight patterns and behaviors. They're totally unrelated, so there's this convergence. I don't know what the astragus has to do with it. Astragus is I didn't tell you that, did I? Astragus is what they call that chastity belt. I'm sorry, every once in a while I get ahead of myself. Astragus, can everyone say astragus? Astragus. And I'm not going to tell you what that means in the Greek. Another one, it's really easy to tell. The one blue in all of North America that is completely absent any markings in the submarginal region of ventral hind wing. Okay, there's no markings there. You've got the post-median row of spots, and they can be various. They can be dark, they can be ringed with white and all that, but there's no other markings externally. All right, so you can nail that one all the time, and it's sister in the same genus, Glaucopsyche. This is the silvery blue, Glaucopsyche ligamus. His sister is the arrowhead blue, Glaucopsyche pyasis, and it's as different as it could be from its sister species, but it's also like extremely easy to identify. I mean, that's a butterfly that, in the key or in the field guide, you just put a picture and you say, this is an arrowhead blue. And if you need any more than this, go study beetles.
The other line is not so.
Huh?
The other part of the couplet is not so.
Not so. Not so good, are you? Right? I like, not so, that's terrible. How would they do that? All right, and this is, you know, a couple of coppers. You guys know which coppers these are? Our guy got Edith's copper. Edith was real popular. She got a checker spot named after her and a copper named after her. I think it was, might have been William Henry Edwards' daughter. And there's a fellow named Meade that married her. And he named, he didn't name Edith's. I don't know how the checker spot got named that, but he named that copper. And then this one, you know what that one is? Mariposa, right. Now, I mean, really, and this is another one. You don't have to do much. If you had to describe the Edith's copper ventral hind wing pattern, you say all spots inflated and with color on the inside, right? Because the spot is inflated and it's got color inside of it, right? But this one, you know, all you have to say is ventral hind wing ashy gray, all spots with a shadow, right? I mean, that's because it kind of looks like a shadow. These aren't my own words, you know, I borrowed them. And then another, I mean, you guys know which, this is the Heloides, that's the purplish copper, and then that's Nivalis over there, the what? Lavender border?
Lilac.
Oh, lilac border, right, good. That's much better. But it's easy to tell. I mean, if you have a problem identifying that butterfly, then, you know, it's like, go to square one. You can go back to a cabbage white and see how you do that. But, so these are butterflies that we can identify pretty easily. We can make field guide, our field marks and enter our field guide, or our field guide entries will be fairly simplistic, consisting mostly of a photograph, right?
Except the females.
Huh?
Except for the females.
You got in trouble, don't you? Yeah. No, except for the females. Although, actually, the females are the same. In most cases, we're looking at ventral surfaces, right? If you're looking at upper surface, yeah, it's a whole new ballgame. You know, like, we'll deal with those things. Okay, so, like, these aren't as easy, but they can all be done. And the reason why they're not as easy is because they actually represent situations like the coleus we looked at, the sulfurs, where in a given population, you can have a number of things that look rather different. Well, these are just dimorphic forms of the same butterfly. These are actually from the same place. And this is just a dimorphic female, the margin white. So we're going to have to, when we're describing this butterfly, include that alternative. You know, that, yeah, you get females that are, you know, flava or yellow tone. And then and this is a case of seasonal polyphenous polymorphism. The one on the left is a spring morph, and the one on the right is a summer morph. And I mean, you know, like if you're in Western Washington and you live like over by Belfair, and you see in margin whites, well, the ones in April, May are going to be like the one on the left, and the ones in July and August are going to be ones. I mean, you know, if you didn't know any better, you'd think they're like different species, right? You have to be able to identify, you know, that these butterflies have these seasonal variations. And you have to be able to delineate them such that people will understand what it is that they're seeing. Now this is harder. This is western white on the left and a checkered white on the right. Now we barely get checkered whites, although we probably get them more often than we think, because everyone that sees the western whites, you know, they're going, probably every 10th western white is a checkered white. And it's just like they're usually going by on the road so fast that you know, you don't get a chance. But fortunately, there's a character, you can almost see it if you look up at the apical region of the forewing. Right where these veins come off the end of the discal cell, which you can kind of see in the western white. Right up there, the veins split. They do so in a different order, slightly different. It's hard to see, certainly on an image, and a little hard to feel unless you know what you're looking for. But it's pretty good. It's a pretty good indicator. So, like, that would be something obviously we would include in the key. Now, y'all know what these are, right? Marbles. Chloe Lada, which is the desert marble on the left, and Chloe Asanides, which is the large marble on the right. And this is actually fairly subtle, but actually fairly profound once you get to know. The size difference here, I chose these two slides so that you can see how wickedly different the hind wing is. Now, the hind wing is actually mounted slightly behind, but even if you rotated it up, you'd see it's much longer, more elongated, and really an entirely different shape. That's hard to describe. Different shapes of wings are hard to describe, and yet in many cases when we're looking at certain butterflies, you know, the shape actually is important, and it's a challenge. Well, it's a challenge to describe. Sometimes it's a challenge to even measure. But the number one criteria for measuring these two butterflies are these spots at the end of the discal cell. So what would you say about those spots from where you're sitting?
Well, they're bolder on the desert.
Yep. Actually, in terms of like length of the forewing, they're thicker. Okay. If you measured from the base, you know, from it's a conspiracy to make me exercise. From here to here, and that's the unit of measurement. And you know, by the time we got done doing that. So that's the basic, and it's actually pretty good. You have to have an eye for it, but what happens is once you have a specimen that you're looking at, and once you recognize that feature, then all of a sudden it actually plays into you know, being able to identify that on a regular basis. There are other features too that we would, you know, I didn't want to spend too much time on any one of these species. If you looked at the ventral hind wing, the marbling is different. You know, there's one that has more yellow, blah this, and there's all those things too. But just wanted to you know, visit some of the features. Now, these are a male and female of the same species, and there's no question about, you know, what the difference is. What is the difference? Yeah, one is seriously yellow, right? And so that's obviously one of the things that you'd include, you know, in your field marks, okay? And I actually think that elephants are pretty easy to tell apart, all right? But a lot of people, you know, it's like as the scale of the creature goes down, the ability to discriminate them becomes inhibited. So I would say that, you know, even though I believe that they're all pretty easy to identify, there are some things that you want to do, you know, to make sure that everyone has a good shot at it, okay? This is the brown elephant, and it's basically kind of like nondescript, and that's almost the way you describe it. If you see a little brown nondescript butterfly flying around in the spring, it's pretty much likely to be a brown elephant. And then this is Moss's elephant. And the thing about it is that if you look at Moss's elephant, there's a striking contrast between the basal area and the limbal area, okay? If you remember that chart. You know, when we do the field guide, we'll have that chart as an insert. You can be able to, you know, so that you know limbal, basal, dorsal, ventral, cephalic, caudal, post-marginal, and well, I just... So the same line is on a brown elephant. It's just that you can't see the contrast because the contrast isn't there. See, the same line is there, right? So you have to be able to describe that line, and you have to be able to use it as a reference for making sure that someone who's trying to identify elephants has that, and they can say, aha, okay, so, you know, exterior to that line, you know, they're going to be color. Brown elephants is basically kind of a round orangish color, and you know, Moss's elephants are basically more of a frosted color. Okay, and then you've got the hoary elephant, Polios, and same thing, that same line. And there you have you know, almost bluish appearance. There's no blue there at all, but it kind of looks like a blue color. But again, between the three images that we've looked at, you have to make those discriminations. The line is here in this butterfly, but this butterfly is one where you really only need to show a picture. You wouldn't have to do it twice because it's in a pretty obvious butterfly. It's not a butterfly you're going to mistake. Once you show a picture of it, if you've got one in your hand or you see one perched on a pine tree, you'll know what it is, right? And that's the pine elk. All right. Now, I thought we were done with sulfurs. I'm sorry. This is about as radically different as a sulfur ventral can be. On the one side you got orange sulfur, and on the left side you got orange sulfur. On the right side you got Alexander sulfur from Colorado. So what you're looking at is a series of spots on the forewing and on the hind wing. We call those erythemy spots because that's the scientific name of the orange sulfur. And they actually exist all around the world, so calling them erythemy spots is very provincial, and I apologize for that, but nobody here but me and you know about it, so who cares? Then you have the discal spot, okay, which is at the end of the discal cell on the ventral line. So we call that the ventral hind wing discal spot. A very interesting structure in the orange sulfur in that it has a very distinctive satellite spot. It's, it's like if you're looking at a picture of the Earth and the Moon from 2 million miles away, and the Moon is rising behind the Earth, and you've got your binoculars fuzzed up. It's like a satellite, and it's double ringed. Okay, so you've got a ring of red that's right around the pearly portion of the spot, and then you've got some sort of pinkish scaling, and then another ring outside of that, which defines the whole spot. So it's a composite spot. Whereas in the Alexandra, you'd be hard pressed to see a ring at all. Okay, that's almost like you could say ventral, hind wing, discal spot, absent, or pearly without a ring. So dorsally, you have the contrasts that we talked about before. I mean, if we had a butterfly in the state, 2 butterflies in the state that consistently look like this, we'd never have a problem telling them apart because they're about as different as you could get. Oops, I missed. Yeah. Now these are the various kinds of shenanigans that ventral hind wing discal spots go through. We just looked at the very profound example in the previous slide, and it's also represented. I'm surprised I didn't hurt myself. I did that one time, using my foot as this was lining up, and I whacked myself right where it hurt. And then you go through all these ramifications. You got a really well-developed satellite spot, then you got one that's like, not really. I mean, I had to cut these out for bigger images, so they're kind of, fuzzy. But I wanted to show, just the kinds of vagaries. And all of these vagaries actually occur in our state. So you'd have to actually define these in some sort of a way. The one over there on the bottom left is Coleus occidentalis. And that's pretty typical of an occidentalis. It's kind of like, it's vaguely smeared red. It's almost always like that. It's never really got, a satellite spot. Never really has anything, more than just that. And then if you get up into the Okanagan County and you're getting the Christina sulfur, that spot in the middle at the bottom is often what you're going to see. And then of course the Alexander, which we get sometimes in the Columbian Basin. Well, up there on the uppermost left, that's the nasty sulfur. And that's a nice spot because there's really nothing like that in the Northwest except on the Labrador sulfur, the greenish sulfur, the nasty sulfur, Coleus nasties. So, but honestly, if you actually get a Coleus nasties, you'll know what it is long before you get a chance to look at the spot. You're going to be at 8,000 feet, and there's going to be a little green nasty thing. You know what it is when it's flying along. So we just do it to be official. Oh yeah.
What's the best way to tell Coleus occidentalis from Coleus interior?
Ask me. I'm working on it. That's why I totally avoided it. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. I mean, even now I can't do it. I sat down and actually said, well, can I do it? And I wrote down a bunch of stuff, and there's like so many exceptions. It's like, you know, you got 2.5 pages discriminating the two. If, or when, and sometimes, you know, it's like, it's pretty hard. And if you got somebody like me around, it's easy, just ask Pelham, right?
You can do it pretty much all
Oh,
the time.
yeah. Because I'm obviously brilliant, right? Yeah. I'm glad you asked. So, the Hesperia skippers are a challenge for everybody. They're actually not so hard once you get to know them a little bit. And the thing is that this is what you normally see of a Hesperia skipper, right? What are they called? Ramping skippers, right? As they land at mud or something like that. And normally, though, you're not even going to get this close to one. So it's going to be hard. Most of the time, you'll see one in a jar that somebody caught, or you're going to be looking at them through binoculars, and they're going to be a lot smaller than that. They're tough. They're tough unless you actually, you know, can see the dorsal surface. The dorsals kind of give them away, but man, this is a spot band. You know, every Hesperia skipper has a ventral hind wing that's basically broken into two components: anterior and the posterior component. And the posterior component, you notice the last spot there is kind of offset basally. Okay. Well, that's also characteristic of the Nevada skipper. But the Nevada skipper, you'll notice, has, you know, like this dark margining around the spots, right? And kind of a hoary aspect to the color. So if you go back and forth between the two things, you can see that they're actually pretty similar. But if you look at the key features, you can start to pick them out. Now, if you see the dorsals, they're a piece of cake. So like in a museum, when you got them spread in a box, it's not a question. You know, the Nevadas are tawny on the upper side, and the Jubas have big black margins. It's really not at all a problem. Now you get to the Idaho, the Western branded skipper. You know, the other's Juba branded skipper and the Nevada branded skipper. These can look like just about anything. In fact, I'm just going to run through some things that they can look like, right? So between all of these here, that's a lot of, yeah.
There's always been some confusion on which basal spot you're talking about. Can you point that out?
Which one?
Which spot you're talking about?
Oh, okay. All right, we'll go back. See the the posterior element of the spot band. It's displaced basally in both Yuba and Nevada. Always in Nevada, mostly in Yuba. Okay? Nevada, Yuba. Nevada, Yuba. But you'll also notice that you see that the Nevadas have kind of a different aspect of the green. It's kind of hoary color, and it's got black margins. It's tough. Those are going to be tough. But again, see, when I do the field guide thing, you know, we're going to be using all of the characteristics, even if you can't see them. So if you happen to be good enough to, well, first of all, get this close to a Nevada skipper, and you also are, you know, maybe close enough to see it open its wings when it's on nectar or something like that, then you can definitely make an identification. But these, when it comes to the Western branded skippers, they're so variable that that's going to be a real problem. These are all belong to basically one species, right? And so that's going to be hard. Now, again, it looks like we got to use images, we're going to have to use descriptive text, and a lot of times, you know, it helps to know where you're at. Like you're not going to get something that looks like this out in the middle of the Columbia Basin, right? And you're not going to get something that looks like that on top of you know, Slate Peak. So, you know, those kinds of things do help. And even though, you know, those aren't strictly speaking taxonomic characters, if you try to write a scientific paper using localities as criteria for identification, it wouldn't fly. The editor would say, well, no, those aren't taxonomic characters. But for people in identifying butterflies, yeah, that works just fine. Okay, now this is another one that's not a real problem in this state, because these are two different subspecies. One, this is a cedar feeder, and this is the juniper feeder of the juniper or the cedar hair streaks. And you know, like really, They're pretty similar to butterflies, and they're pretty distinctive, okay? But that's also a juniper hair streak, and that's one from like Idaho. And we could get something that looks like that, put a little green in it, and that would be, a problem. So like that's one of the things that I was talking with Bob as he was doing his Cascadia work. He's, actually more peripheral. He's talking about Washington, Oregon, a little bit of Idaho, and getting into peripheral areas. He had to actually deal with these kinds of butterflies. So sometimes we will. Now, there's another issue that we're going to talk about all the time on field trips is metallic scaling, okay? These are two butterflies that are actually very similar. I'm not even sure that I can, tell you how they differ. There's not really solid criteria. I guess the genitalia play a role, but more, I'm showing this Melissa on the left and Idas, the mountain, on the right. Mountain blue, is that right? Northern blue. Which one's the mountain blue?
We don't have one.
The Arctic.
That's not a standard name. The other one is.
Well, I'm not a standard fella either, So the most important thing here is to recognize the metallic, because people are going to talk about that all the time. Nabokov called them the scintillating, and I love that word because there's a song that goes with it. Scintillating, scintillating. No? You don't think so? I have to Google that.
John, can you go back to that last one? So if I'm looking at those two in the field, I can tell the difference in a Melissa and a Northern. But looking at those two pictures.
Well, I don't
it
know.
looks so
Where have you seen a northern blue?
Northern blue up in Okanagan, and then, that's where I've seen
At Moses Meadows.
And also down in Enterprise.
In Oregon, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
When I was back
Well,
here.
actually, you're right. It can be tough. Let's put it this way. Ernst Dornfeld, when he did the butterflies of Oregon, got them all wrong because he hadn't figured it out. It took us a while to figure it out. Really, no excuse for it because John Shepard in 1964 wrote the penultimate paper on that, past Nabokov, that is, and he actually identified all of these things. It just took a long time for people to catch on, and they're variable. And the other thing that's important to remember is that these butterflies actually hybridize to some degree. So northern blues, like from Okanagan or from British Columbia, really are different. The ones that you get closer to the range of Melissa will actually converge on that pattern a little bit. I have to sympathize with people trying to discriminate. The females are radically different on the dorsal side, but the ventral surfaces are actually rather similar. But
There we go.
Huh?
That would be helpful, yes.
Yeah. Well, those are all things that are going to have to be done as part of creating this guide. And you can see, I'm going to be coming back to you all from time to time. I'm going to put different combinations of words together and then ask you all if you can improve upon it. Are you coming back, bro?
Am I coming back?
No.
No, right.
Well, I didn't know what I can't hardly tell what you're doing anyway. So.
John, on the northern Melissa, there's a color difference and a width difference in those orange bands.
Pretty much, yeah. But it's only partially accurate rendition. That's the problem. And the exceptions, that's the problem. If you have something that only works at 60%, it's almost not worth talking about because that's 40% that you're going to be wrong with. I mean, if I do 85%, I'm feeling pretty good. That's a probabilistically reasonable expectation that you're going to be able to identify things. And then, the collective, there's more things than just these images, too, that would help. Obviously, as we construct these field guides, we're going to have feedback on them, and it will be using other characters so that you can make a better judgment on the matter. But this is an example that we run into all the time. Is this is a buckwheat blue on the right and a lupin blue on the left, and they're very similar actually. If you actually just look at them on a flower, you might not, recognize how different they really are, but you can see that the Lumen blue has scintillant spots. And, these are small butterflies, and you can see those spots aren't big. So you're looking at, small markings on a small butterfly. It's sometimes pretty hard, to grasp or to see. So you really do have to look for them. And I think, I'm thinking, like the observation canisters that people carry with them in the field would be augmented by, a hand lens. It wouldn't be a bad idea too, so that you can, but me, I don't have a problem because I catch them and I put them in death chambers. It's like I know what I'm getting, but that's not my job. I got to get it so that you guys can figure it out. And this is an example of a Lumen blue sitting on. It's not like the scintillae are really, really obvious, but they're where they're supposed to be. So if you're looking where you're supposed to be looking, you will see them, right? Okay, so what's happening? Oh yeah, now this is buckwheat blue, right? So we're looking at kind of like what you'd be seeing in the field, right?
What's it on?
Huh?
What's it on?
Oh, it looks like that's an ombulatum. It's a glaucon from Oregon. I just picked it because it was a nice image. Yeah, you would notice that, wouldn't you? I had to talk to you before I give these presentations. Like, if you see something, Dave, don't say anything. All right. Now, Calophrys, green hair streaks. I call them elephants, all right? You know why? Okay, this is a diversion, all right? We all know what hair streaks are, and we all know why they're called hair streaks, right? Because they have little tiny hair streaks. And we know why elephants are called elephants. No, we don't. Somebody just called them elephants, but they were elephants because somebody called them elephants. Well, if you look at it, what does that look like? Does that look like a hair streak? No, it's a green elephant. See, I'm arbitrating, because I'm tired of orange sulfurs. I'm tired of things that don't make sense. I want to start the revolution, and we got the body right here to do it, all right? So, from now on, oh well. They're green elephants, come on guys. They're hard. The best way to discriminate green hair streak elephants is to watch them when they're alive. Now I can go into a collection, I can pretty much figure it out. This is a butterfly, this is a male on the left side there. We don't, in Washington, usually see males that are that orange, that yellow, or tawny. But it helps in other places discriminate them from the other green elephants because none of the others are as tawny as that, all right? Ours end up looking more like that, which, as you'll see, will be very confusing when compared to others. It's hard. Now, I showed you two images of these butterflies that are immaculate. It's like they really kind of live up to one of their names, is immaculate, right? But trust me, none of those things really work out very well. If somebody says, immaculate green hair streak, you can almost be guaranteed that it's not, that there's, got spots and whatnot. But that's another thing. So we're going to go to Sheridan's, okay? Now, that is pretty typical Sheridan's hair streak elephant. You go down Schnebly, you're going to see something that looks, kind of like that, and they go all the way. Like the idea that you got, these really nice white stripes, and then one day in Schnebly, you'll get both of these types of appearances. So you can see that if you're going to make, a field mark, create a field mark for these things, you're going to have to be creative and, inclusive. And that's a challenge too. You'd think that there'd be something in these other little curlicues and all the different, fringe colors and stuff like that, but they're not. None of those things really work out too much. And so then we got the bramble green hair streak. And I'm going to run through this and see if you guys can tell me what the major difference between that is. All right. Question?
John?
Yeah?
Is there any significance to the difference in the antennae?
There might be actually. I think that
The previous slide of this one, the antennae appeared to be radically different in length
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
And this one there, the pub is different.
Those are the same.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's looked at that anyway. So I'm gonna run through all this is the first one, yes, this immaculate green, right? Another immaculate green. We got Sheridan's, Bramble. Can anybody tell me?
Brown.
Yeah.
This-
Right here in the forewing, and the discal, subdiscal portion, the portion below the discal cell is brown, right? The others are either, got green or they're gray. Green actually extends much further into the disc. And this turns out to be a fairly decent character, aside from the fact that they mostly occur in western Washington or western Oregon, where the others don't.
The question on this, the line is turned into a row of spots instead of a line. Is that diagnostic?
No, that happens all the time with these.
Okay.
It's really disconcerting. I mean, if you were in Colorado, you have consistencies. As you get into Washington and Oregon, you get the things that are fairly solid line occurring right alongside the things that are separate dots or almost immaculate. Now, one thing about the Bramble, which is fairly consistent, is that not a usual series of spots. It's usually one or two spots, and usually, as you can see in this case, two similar spots in the same location. But even that's not real reliable. It's like one of those 60% deals, right? So, and here's where we're going to get into some interesting things. And this is really hard. This is Pucuvius dusty wing, right? Now, what I want to do is look at this portion of the wing right there. See that orange scale patch? Oops. That is very characteristic for this butterfly, and it's really hard to describe. It's at the end of the discal cell. It is a tawny patch, and it's like, I hate saying like tawny patch because that sounds so indefinite, and it is. But we're trying to find it's so useful as a character that that it's one of those that you're gonna want to repeat. You want people to know and see, because once you do see it, it's like it stands out, and it really does. You guys see what I'm talking about? That tawny patch there. Okay, and then polygonias. Now I wanted to do this. I said, I'm not gonna have enough time, but we have 4 species of angle wings. And all of them are actually fairly distinguishable. And Melanie and I had, we had a tete-a-tete on this. She had some great images from up the Reeser, and we were looking at a lot of them. Was at least 2 species present. Like, was it on scat or something, on poop or something?
Yes,
Yeah.
probably. I had a lot of them.
Yeah.
It was hard to tell what they were actually going into the ground. I couldn't tell if it was minerals, but some were on
Right.
scat also.
Okay, so the features that are most important include like all these green spots on the ventral hind wing. You see something like those green spots, then they become important for all the species. Okay, see, they're not at all on the Saturn angle wing, and barely. You see there's little, you see there's kind of yellowish orange or yellowish spots that are kind of there, but certainly not in the what is it, Aureus?
Aureus.
Yeah, they're not there at all. So, basically, if you're seeing those, man, it's like a dead. You don't have to go very much further than that. It's a fawn. But if you wanted to, and wanted to have, features, and we will, of course, in a field march, I'll be making note of the bands that are on the dorsal hind wing. That marginal band, or if you wanted to say a marginal band with submarginal spots within it, that is almost a classic character as well. And if you look at the Saturn angle wing, you have that same band present, but the marginals, or the submarginal spots within it, are expanded to the extent that it almost wipes it out. And certainly, by the time you get to the Hori?
Yes.
Hori angle wing, they've expanded so that the band is almost not present at all. Almost the only way you can talk about the band is in terms of the spots that have eaten it up, right? Then you get back to the Aureus, And you can see that that band is present again, but it's again not like the font. So like there are these characters that we're going to be looking at. Okay, we'll go back. Look at the question mark. Okay, the comma on the ventral hindwing. If you look at that, I should have blown it up. I should have had some more, but you know I was pressed for time. There's hooks. There's hooks on the end of that. It actually is expanded at the tips, and that's not unique, but it's only shared by the saddle, right? And so like that is a very useful feature. And then the other thing with the angle wings is color. I would almost call this color. People say brown, grayish brown. I almost say there's a purplish aspect to it. Anybody else see that purplish color? All right, there we go. I feel better about myself already. Looks like I really needed that, huh? That color is also very distinctive. There's no other angle wing in western United States that approaches that brown color. It can be more yellowish brown. It can be much darker than that. It can be better marked. I think we might even have an example that's better marked. No, you don't. So that's pretty characteristic too. So we're going through a slew of characters that actually help you out. Now that comma is basically it's just barely there. It's just like official. You know, there's no just an angle, and it's hardly noticeable at all. Same with the aureus. But I mean, you know, when you talk about the aureus angle wing, you're wasting your time if you're talking about anything except it's black. You know, this is
It's black. It's black here, but it's not like Northeast Oregon. It's not black.
You from Northeast Oregon?
Hard time.
Yeah, making trouble. Okay, yeah, it's black here. This is here. This is like Northeast Oregon. And it's like, you're right. But it's still darker than anything else.
Okay.
Right. Northeast Oregon. All right. So now I think we're coming to the end of what I wanted to do. We're talking about details of color and pattern. This is basically two species, and you can see how similar they are in terms of overall construct. The basic difference between the two of them, and it's moderately reliable actually, is the spot that's just at the base of this blue patch, okay? You have, in the one case, a crescent-shaped spot on the left side. That's California hair streak, and the Sylvan hair streak is on the right. It's a bar-shaped spot. You also notice that the extent of the orange is very limited. The California hair streak can have those spots extend all the way up the outer margin of the wing. They can also, as you'll notice, be conjoined. You see the cap on the blue, or the hoary patch. It's not blue scales there at all. It looks blue, but it's just white with black over the top of it. In California, that the spot at the anal margin actually is conjoined with the cap over the blue spot, which is not so in the Sylvan hair streak at all. And so, you know, this is the color. These are all both Sylvan hair streaks. And of course, in this case, you know, you can see that all the markings on the one on the right are pretty much obscured. Well, that's almost a diagnostic character. I mean, if you get a hair streak that looks, you know, like you can say all spots obsolescent, then you know what you're talking about is a Sylvan hair streak. So, and then you know the coloration, which is between these. Yeah, the coloration. You can see that even though the one on the right here is a Sylvan hair streak, it's much more like a California hair streak, whereas these are very divergent. We don't know but what this is actually ecological variation, so we're not sure. But you know, if you're going to talk about it in a manual, in a field guide, and you're going to look for field marks, you have to be able to explain all of that, right? So that's what a California hair streak looks like on a rabbit brush, and that's what a Sylvan hair streak looks like on a Pearly Everlasting. And you can see it actually pretty similar, but if you look, that key character, which is the crescent-shaped mark, you know, to the base of the blue patch, it's bar-shaped in one and it's crescent in the other. All right, so now we are looking at another example of, now, can you guys tell what the food plant, or the nectar source is?
Milkweed.
Yeah, absolutely. They love milkweeds. In Kittitas Valley, you go along, as you're coming down from Reeser Creek, you hit the main highway that's going up to Blue Pass. All those willows along there, those milkweeds get to blooming. Those things will have hundreds of these hair streaks sitting on them. They're really something to see. All right, I told you we'd get to the good stuff. Now, I have to tell you here that there was a misprint. I didn't notice until the end, but I kept it in there because it's great. They talk about all the parts, and they're actually labeled very well. I don't like the name that they give to the male intromittent organ. I like saying that. The male intromittent organ is a penis. That sounds pretty ordinary, but it's very mammalian too. I learned it as the Aegus.
And most technical texts will use that too.
Aegus, right? I like that a lot better. Besides which, you can say that in public and people don't even know. So, can you guys figure out the misprint?
Associates.
Ancus, yeah. That's supposed to be anus. You had uncus right above it. I could just see some grad students. All right, and this is the more interesting part. This is the female genitalia. Females are absolutely, in case anyone of you had any doubt, females are the more important sex, and every living thing that has sex is they reproduce, they bear the children, they have the eggs, they do all that stuff. Males, as I said earlier, are just useless bags of sperm. That can occasionally place a spragus. Okay, so just remember that, if males out there, you think about, well, I might have a spragus available, if necessary, but very convoluted, situation there. We got the ovaries, of course, produce the eggs. Everyone knows that. And but this area right here, that's where the sperm is stored. And the males actually are more than just useless bags of sperm. They're useless bags of sperm with sperm donation that goes with it. They have a proteinaceous substance that they encapsulate the sperm with, and this is dissolved in the bursa and used as female nutrition. Okay, so the males are really giving their all. There's people that have studied how many times butterflies mate, and they found some interesting things. The females mate maybe 2 to 3 times, or maybe more, but 2 to 3 times is pretty much the average is 2.7 or something like that. And they always choose young juicy males. Males, on the other hand, once they've mated, it's hard going. They just they don't have the right stuff to get second mating, and so the male investment the first time around is big time. All right. Now me, I prefer tetragonins. Okay. Anybody here know what tetragonins are? Of course, Rod knows. Right. They're orthops. They're like katydids, and they sing, and the males sing. And the males sit high so that the females can hear them. And then they sing their song, and all the females come and they go, "Oh, we love you, we love you." And the male says, "I don't have that one." Right? And it turns out that it's not nearly that romantic. That male is making sure that their investment, which is really high, as much as 30% of body weight, in the female, it's a serious investment, so that they're singing to the female and getting the females their choice for the next best chance for their offspring. So it's just it was kind of disappointing to actually hear that, because I thought maybe my singing would amount to something. But I'm done. Man. You got any questions? Come on, you don't have any questions. It's like,
I got loads of questions, Jeff.
well, you don't count. You can get me anytime, right? He was my ride when I was laid up. He took me to the doctor.
And what about butterflies?
Now we talk about butterflies. Yeah.
Well, for some things like soils, they have color cards that you can put there, and well, this one doesn't fit, this one does, and so on. Are those useful for butterflies? A lot of it seems so mixed with a whole bunch of stuff all.
I think that's the problem. I mean, you know, there's people that study moths. Hey, you won the scholarship, right? And glad to see you. I'm sorry that you had to endure, you know, all of the prurient interest and stuff. I forgot we had a young person right in the front row. I hate being a bad influence, but I have been my whole life.
Just to make trouble, Doug. I kept thinking about all the colors and stuff, and you know, obviously people in other areas of entomology have to deal with that, and Rod would know more about this than I would, but in Melville Hatch's tomes of beetles, he has millions, or figuratively speaking, millions of names for colors and subtleties of colors he had to deal with. But it'd probably be too much work to have to mine through his work to get all the colors. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a good chance that it would be more confusing. There's a good chance that if I went to the trouble of trying to describe all the individual colors that you're likely to encounter, you know, in any given one of the sulfurs, for example, that you're doing yourself a disservice, or the reader a disservice. What I try to do is find things that are a little more concrete than a color. Or if I'm describing the color, you know, do it in such a way as to make sure that a person hearing my description is not going to feel too confident that it is one thing or another, because most of the colors we're talking about are sort of a panoply. Did I use that word right?
Yeah. I mean, there's names, like for instance, the green on the other side of the polygony.
Right.
There's a name for that kind of green.
Yep. But that's the difference between a poet and a scientist. You know, you would know that, right?
It's a scientific word. I forget the word, but there's a name for that. It has to do with the color of oxidation on certain kinds of metal.
I was going to say malachite or azurite. Well, azurite.
Anyway, the short version of everything I was going to say was there are names for those colors and those weird combinations.
Well, it sounds like you want to be a fundamental part of this operation, you know, like you can help me figure out all those colors, you know? You volunteering, bro?
I don't know.
Maybe not. Any more questions? Yeah?
Sometimes your field guy's gonna be.
Well, I didn't, you know, I wanted this to be interactive, but I knew at the end, you know, I was going to do most of the talking.
If you really want prurient interest, you should forget about butterflies and katydids and talk about sex and tsetse flies.
Sounds like you were volunteering to give us a presentation.
No, I mean, there's one paper, and I wouldn't make a whole presentation, but it provides evidence that the female tsetse flies preferentially mate with males that will give them greater genital stimulation.
I think you could make that a presentation. It might be kind of exotic and interesting.
Could you do it in like 15
Get
minutes?
somebody to act out the roles of the flies. All right, yeah?
So we're going to put this all together and make it available for people.
Well, and this is another problem. You know, as Caitlin has been able to do this with PDF files, and I suspect that that's going to be the likely way to go, at least just for the field guide portion of it. I mean, you know, as a field guide to, you know, the butterflies of Washington State, I honestly feel like, you know, if you include all the stuff that we know about a butterfly, then you make it a book, right? I'm looking just to have those things that so you can carry it into the field, and I'm thinking probably under 30 pages, you know, if you print it out from a PDF, right? And I'm not sure. We might go another different way. Caitlin's been experimenting with some different ways to do things. I think what's clear, and Bob Pyle told me this, and he made this decision a long time ago when he did Watching Washington Butterflies. You guys seen Watching Washington Butterflies? It's just big, right? It's just a little. And you know, Peterson had it nailed. It's like, if it's too big, nobody's going to carry it into the field. It's not going to be useful. If it's too big, even if it's small, it's too thick, it's not going to be useful either. So something that is like on the order of a small hand-sized thing that can go in your pocket or in a backpack easily, how we get there from, where we are, that's going to be a matter, because you have to work pretty hard to, condense it down. But does that sound like a format you'd be interested in?
No, definitely. You've sent me some wonderful emails that I shared with people.
Oh dear.
Hope you don't mind.
Did I use the language properly?
The language was well done.
Okay.
But
Well, it sounds like an awful lot of these, you go out and you catch one specimen, and you can't be sure. And it seems to me your field guide legitimately could have a lot of weasel words in it. This
Yeah.
is the most likely, but it could be a whole bunch of other stuff.
No, I like weasel. I think that there's an appropriate way to use weaseling. I've looked at a lot of people and their efforts to, the things that I don't like is when you see a book, and I don't want to pick on Glassberg because Oppler did it too. They have a line that points to this mark on a wing. That's almost never true. I mean, when people say immaculate green hair streak, I know right away it's got spots, right? If somebody says this is so, then I know there's always an exception. So field marks are like, I'd like to weasel for every field mark that I want to mention. But you're right, you have to do it within a certain parameter. And there's going to be some things that you just can't do. I mean, checker spots are going to be really, really hard. If I manage to do checker spots in the field, I will try. I will do it mostly on the basis of, like, if you're in the Columbia Basin, these are the butterflies and the checker spots you're likely to see. If you're at Slate Peak or the North Cascades, these are the checker spots you're like you see. In fact, we had this discussion with Regina. She was getting all these, Regina Rochefort, is that how you say her last name?
Who's it?
Rochefort.
Rochefort.
She was getting these images from like around Mount Rainier, and she had images from up North Cascades of checker spots that they look like the same thing, right? And I said, well, and that's the way checker spots go. We have done extensive sampling and done all the dissection, and we know that Anicia checker spots don't get south of a certain point in the Cascades, and snowberry checker spots don't get north of a certain point in the Cascades. And knowing that, actually, it's kind of a weasel in a sense, because actually it could. I mean, you might, be, in fact, Droppers is always sticking his nose in a place where we might see some things, get a little bit further north or a little bit further south than we have thought. There's always things like that happen, but for the most part, I mean, it's like, probabilistically, if you're right 95% of the time, that's pretty good, right? And that 5% of the time, you look like an idiot, and that's just the way things go. Right? Are we done?